Hello, Disney fans. I'm your host, Stephanie, for the classic animated Disney branch of Standard Definition. We all know that we can't have a nostalgia podcast with I can't even talk right now, it's so much for my hype level, without recording episodes covering the classic Disney hand-drawn animated movies. These Disney movies will be reviewed in release order, starting from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, all the way up to The Princess and the Frog in 2009. I'm joined by my awesome fellow co-host, Corey Dirrig.
That's me. Hi, I'm here.
Here and present, and Mark Pererra.
Hello.
Okay, well, I'm just going to get right to business tonight with housekeeping. Again, this is Standard Definition, the Retro Nostalgia Podcast here on the Boss Rush Network, where ow, my cat's hurting me. Each and every Sunday, we come together with our friends around the internet to talk about games, movies, shows, and other topics that make us nostalgic. You can support us and get the show 2 weeks early, I believe, by heading over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Boss Rush Network, or subscribe on free feeds. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it because it helps with searchability. You can also catch all our content on the YouTube channel and on bossrush.net. Bam! How's that?
Nailed it.
Except I forgot the merch store. The merch store is now open. Click on the store tab of our website to buy a variety of items with our show logos, including Standard Def and the various iterations like the Marvel Universe and Disney and maybe Indiana Jones, ?
Soon, yes. Well, it should be up by the time this posts. Should be.
Cool. So yeah, check it out. It's got a lot of cool stuff. I already bought a couple sweatshirts and long sleeve shirts. Anyway, tonight we will be discussing Dumbo. Hold on one second. Maybe you guys can give your backgrounds about like when you first watched Dumbo?
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say my first introduction to Dumbo really was Disney World, to be honest with you. I mean, It's the iconic ride, just goes in circles. Use a lever, goes up and down. Dumbo flies, and then you're like, oh, well, why is this elephant flying, And then obviously the big puffy VHS tape boxes, right? I mean, my mom worked for Disney for a while, so like every time a new one would come out, she would bring it home and, we'd bring it and put it in the puffy case stack. And Dumbo is one of the ones that I don't really remember all that well when I was watching it. Like I was like, okay, yeah, Dumbo flies, his mom is a traditional Disney mom who something terrible happens, right? Not necessarily death, but something terrible happens. Dumbo's got huge ears, and I remember him getting made fun of for having big ears. And Timothy Mouse, being the kind of the ringleader. But like overall, like I just do not remember Dumbo. Like I didn't remember any of it. Like, I mean, once I started watching it, like the train, like the train song at the beginning was like, I remember that song, but I didn't know, like, it's weird because like I remember this movie, but I remember parts of the movie outside of the movie. Right, like the train song was like a song that they used to play on the train at Disney World when it would go around the Magic Kingdom, right? And it's like,
that's right.
Timothy Mouse was standing on top of the Dumbo ride, so like that, and then obviously the whole thing now over at Disney World, like they just redid Fantasyland, and it's all like the big circus themed, and it's all kind of Dumbo and Mickey Mouse themed, but like. Other than that, I didn't remember a lot of this movie. I'm going to be quite honest with you. It just kind of...
Yeah.
It's funny how much... Because I feel the same way. Well, I didn't love Dumbo growing up. I think like most kids, I was traumatized by a few scenes in this movie. But
yeah.
But it's funny because I felt the same way about Snow White. I felt the same way about Pinocchio. There are some things that are just so cemented in my brain about those movies that when you rewatch them, they're not a huge part of the movie. Like for Pinocchio, because I think obviously we'll talk about Dumbo later this episode, but like for Pinocchio, for example, I thought like in my head, I think Pinocchio, I think he lies and his nose grows. and that happens once or twice, maybe in the movie, right? And so there's just these things that get so like ingrained in my memory, and so I was surprised with Dumbo that there were so many things that I thought Dumbo was about that it really wasn't about at all, but they just were so cemented in my head.
Mark,
yeah.
I was sorry to cut you off. I want to be able to maximize the time we have with you. I didn't mention earlier, Mark has to just pop off a little earlier. Did you have a chance to watch the live action adaptation?
I did. Yeah. So I watched the live action one, just for fun. I mean, well, for fun is a strong word because it wasn't fun to watch, but because I wanted to kind of, as we're going through this, if there's a live action, I want to watch it to see what it adds to the legacy of the character in the movie, right? Or if there's, a TV show or something. And so what's so weird about the movie is that, it's directed by Tim Burton. It stars Danny DeVito and Michael Keaton, like a reunion for the three of them from Batman Returns. Danny DeVito is great is a strong word, but like he's a well-loved actor. Michael Keaton is a fantastic actor. Tim Burton is a loved director. It was so boring. And the choices that were made, did either of y'all watch the live action movie?
I did not.
The choices that were made in that movie were so bizarre. It's like the plot. I mean, obviously they expanded on the plot because Dumbo's like an hour and Dumbo animated is an hour. Dumbo live action is like 2. So they expanded on the plot and they made humans the key character. I mean, Dumbo was a key character, but animals don't talk in the movie, and so they added a plot about some kids whose mother died, obviously, because that's a Disney movie. But it just was like the acting was terrible. Everyone felt bored and like they were just phoning it in. And it was not a great movie. There were a few nice nods to the animated film, the Pink Elephants on Parade, before Dumbo goes out for his like big performance. It's established very early on in the live action movie that Dumbo can fly. So when he goes out to his big performance, right before then, the act before that is this act with these like dancers, and they have these big bubble wands, and then the bubble wands turn into pink elephants, and it's very short, but it was like a nice little nod to that. And then there's a line where like, Dumbo accidentally gets drunk in the animated movie. And so there's a line where one of the clowns in the live action movie is like, hey, let's have some champagne, Dumbo, some champagne for Dumbo. And Danny DeVito's like, no alcohol for the kids or something like that.
Interesting.
That's funny.
So, I mean, it just was a terrible movie. And like Tim Burton even phoned it in. Like Tim Burton is known for his like dark whimsy and his like, really tragic characters, which I think Dumbo is a tragic character, but like the other, it just was not good.
Yeah, but you see like Tim Burton's directing style, especially with like the recent Disney stuff. Like my favorite era of Tim Burton, and I know a lot of people really like Batman '89, but like when I think of Tim Burton, I think of Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach and Coraline, right? Like that's the era of Tim Burton that I think of. And then when I think of like recent Tim Burton, it's just kind of like disappointing a little bit, I would say, in a sense. Sure. Or just like maybe as a human being, I have outgrown the Tim Burton style, right? Because like I really liked Nightmare and Coraline and James and the Giant Peach, but I don't really like Edward Scissorhands, for example, is like I don't like that movie. So like when Alice in Wonderland, which was like one of the more recent ones, right, that he directed the first one, it was like this movie's just weird. I feel like it's just weird because it's Tim Burton and they have to be weird because it's Tim Burton. Right. And don't get me wrong, Tim Burton's directed some great movies that are like not weird at all, Right. But like when it comes to these movies, it's like I don't know. Like and like Alice in Wonderland is like the perfect story for Tim Burton to direct. And I I could not get it. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I just didn't get it.
Yeah, but I mean, even Alice in Wonderland has his, like, you know, I agree. I didn't love Alice in Wonderland, the live action, but it has his, like, his knack for visual flair. And you can feel that he's trying to do something. He's trying to do Tim Burton stuff, right? But you can feel he's invested in it, and you can feel he's trying to say something creatively. And with Dumbo, it was just like there. It just wasn't. I don't know. It just didn't feel as because I'm not a huge Tim Burton fan either. But I can at least respect that he's got a style and he's got an eye for things. And this just was what was the point of making the movie?
Yeah.
So I'll save y'all from watching the live action one because it was terrible.
Oh, it's disappointing though. I mean, when I remember recalling seeing the trailers, I'm like, oh, this looks like it could be good, but deep down, I'm like, no, I'm upset.
Yeah. I think the last Tim Burton movie I actually really enjoyed was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I don't know if you guys watched that at all. It's kind of like a mix. It's like a mix between like Harry Potter and X-Men, but in like this really whimsical fantasy world. It's on Hulu if you guys want to watch it. It's interesting. It's not like the best movie, but it was one of his better outings of recent memory. So,
okay. Yeah. Cool. Before you peace out, Mark, I want you to partake in our Disney trivia. So tonight is the voice actor for Mr. Stork, who had a very brief appearance in the movie. He was in the beginning delivering Dumbo Jr. He also voiced. Oh, whoops. Okay. Sorry. The voice actor for Mr. Stork also voiced which character in another Disney film? A, Winnie the Pooh from the Winnie the Pooh features. B, the Cheshire Cat, Alice in Wonderland. C, Peter Pan. Or D, A and B.
I know he voiced Winnie the Pooh. I'm pretty sure. I mean, God, I don't even remember what the Cheshire Cat sounds like. I know he voiced Winnie the Pooh. I'm just gonna go A.
Tick tock.
Sorry.
How about you, Mark?
Oh my gosh, there's all these Skype bubble sounds they're recording now.
I feel like
I'm sorry.
I mean, it's A and B.
Ding, ding, ding. Mark, you got it right. He, along with several other characters in his Disney portion of his career, he was Winnie the Pooh as well as the Cheshire Cat. And I remember when he was laughing, I'm like, oh my goodness, it sounds just like Mr. Stork when I was watching the movie.
A lot of the cast, like this, the cast with this film particularly, went on to do, like, they're like Disney royalty. Like the Dumbo's mom, Jumbo, she's the Queen of Hearts, and she was in what else did she do? She was in Aristocats, and she was in Lady and the Tramp, and there are so many. A lot of these actors like would go on and do the other films, and that was kind of like we didn't really see that with Snow White and with Pinocchio. This was kind of the first time that they kind of they started to keep things like within the same group of people.
Yeah. So Disney definitely found his favorites to work with, right? Like he definitely, like, I mean, you see that later on too with like Jungle Book and Robin Hood are two, like the entire cast is the same. The entire cast, right? Like it's just he had his favorites, and when they worked, and then he just fit them in.
And Disney's done that for years. I mean, even now, I forget the actor's name, but he was the Duke of Wesselton in Frozen, and then in Zootopia he was the something of Weaseltown, and he's been Alan Tudyk.
Yeah.
Alan Tudyk. Yeah. He's. I mean, they've used him, and now they're starting to use Bill Hader in a lot of the same. Like they love to use, especially if it's not a primary role, like a lead role. They love to reuse voice actors over and over again.
Yeah.
One that sticks out in my mind about a reasonable character, I'm trying to find him now, but he's very famously known to be recasted in any Pixar movie.
Yeah.
I'm trying
John Ratzenberger.
Yeah, the guy who plays Ham and
Ham, yep, that's
Mac
one
and
of-
Cars. And
one of the movies, they made a little jab at it, like, I forget, like, just like, let's reuse a character or a voice actor from another movie. I know I'm butchering it, but I swear I saw it in a movie. And I'm like, oh, he's making it funny on himself.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, at the end of Cars, like they did like a post-credit scene or something, and they're in a drive-through theater, and so they did car versions of other Pixar movies. So they had like Monster Trucks Inc.
Yeah,
and
Toy Car Story and
Toy Car Story, right? But every scene they showed was a scene that had John Ratzenberger in it, and so then that was the joke. Like, they use the same actor every time, but they've used him, I think, in every film except for like Onward or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't think I have any strong feeling towards it, but it's, in a sense, it's kind of nice because there's a sense of familiarity, and I don't know if there's ever been a time where I disliked it necessarily. But there you go. It's the trivia. So, just hard facts about Dumbo. It was released in October 23rd, 1941. The live adaptation that apparently is not so great was released in 2019. That's a very stark difference. And one of you guys, I think, Mark, it was you that mentioned that it has a very short runtime, one of the shortest Disney movies at 64 minutes.
It felt at least 3 times that long.
I mean, it felt hours longer.
Yeah.
So much longer.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was shocked. And finances, we can start seeing, because we are reviewing Disney movies in time release order that, Disney is now picking up with success. Its cost at the time was $950,000, which cost less than its predecessors, but it grossed roughly more than $1.3 million in its original release alone. So, and if you look at the year 1941, it still had its issues with the World Wars and all that stuff, but somehow Dumbo managed to still be a critically acclaimed success. And quick note, since we are on release date, we were kind of considering whether or not we would discuss Fantasia, because Fantasia came out between Pinocchio and Dumbo, but because we wanted to stay to our strict definition of, classic animated Disney movie, whereas Fantasia is more like an anthology of musical numbers without dialogue, we figured it wouldn't really kind of fit kind of our structure here. However, if you are on our Patreon and are at that level where you want to provide feedback and you want to see us talk about Fantasia or other shorter Disney either shows or movies, Mark, I know you might have mentioned your notes, like if you guys want us to cover anything else that might fall a little bit out of the mainline releases, send them our way.
Yeah, let us know. It's
let us know.
Not opposed to doing it. We just thought like we would start with the major motion pictures, right? And like Stephanie said, like Fantasia is it's a fantastic piece of Disney history. Like the way the music moves with the animation is second to none to the time period, right? But like it's not a movie, it's an anthology of musical pieces with great animation to it. And we just didn't feel like it was kind of worth putting in the time without feedback. If you guys want us to review it, we'll put it in there, but it just felt like it didn't fit the structure of the other movies. So.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't want you guys thinking we were snubbing it or forgot about it.
Fantasia sucks.
Which, just as a side note, it's those are one of the things that when I saw when I was younger, maybe as a kid, I don't know if it's really a kid-friendly type thing, because a couple of the scenes in Fantasia were nice, like the Mickey Mouse with the broomsticks that he enchanted to come alive. But then there are some other portions that either terrified or confused me, and I just
Night on Bald Mountain is terrifying.
Yeah, Chernobog is just he's scary. Also,
horrifying.
Fun fact, real quick about Fantasia, though. Do you know what the wizard's name is?
Oh,
yes.
It's Yen Sid.
Oh,
and it's Disney spelled backwards.
yeah.
Bum.
Welcome to Standard Definition, where we talk about Dumbo and Fantasia.
It's 2 for 1.
2 for 1 tonight. All right.
You're getting that dollar's worth tonight, guys.
Exactly. See? I'm telling you, that dollar goes a long way. Dumbo comes, like I said, critically acclaimed. I decided to take a few clips from some articles here. The New York Times stated it's the most genial, most endearing, wow, they use most a lot here, completely precious cartoon feature film ever to emerge from the magical brushes of Walt Disney's wonder-working artist. Goodness. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I mean, only 3 grand motion pictures have come out, so Time magazine said, like story and characters, Dumbo's coloring is soft and subdued, free from picture postcard colors and confusing detail, a significant technical advance. Sorry,
who wrote this?
Time, but this happened in 1941, so it's kind of funny reading that.
All the writers must have been at the war, and they just hired people off the street to write.
It's just funny to read that, like, significant technological advance. Here we're all like, oh, this is hand drawn. Like, where's the CGI?
But they also used, like, they had pioneered so much technology for Snow White and for Pinocchio, and then you get to Dumbo, which is happening in the middle of the war. So they have no budget to do anything, and so they switched to watercolor backgrounds. Like, they decreased the amount of technology they used.
You can
tell.
And
that review saying, like, oh, technological advancements, and it's like, no, they took shortcuts and cut corners.
And you can tell this movie looks bad. Like, this was the first time out of, like, all these. Like, I watched a little bit of Fantasia because I didn't know if we were watching it or not, right? And, like, that movie is, like, the animation in that movie is downright perfect, right? Like, every single movement of every single character, and, like, the ice skating of the fairy on the ice, right? And how the ice spreads and makes these, like, beautiful kind of snowflake style designs. You get the Dumbo, man. This movie looks like this. It should have been the first movie that came out, right? Yeah. I was watching, I was, like, shocked at how bad this movie looked. Like,
which makes you wonder what would Dumbo have been like had the war not have happened? Like, obviously, I think Dumbo was in production before things got bad, and so they had to cut some corners in the middle of production. So I wonder, because I don't know, Dumbo just seems like such a small film, and it is in the terms of setting, and I mean, it takes place in one place, right? And we talked about the leap from Snow White to Pinocchio was astronomical, the leap between the two in terms of scope and setting and characters and animation and all of that. And so you have to wonder, what plans did Disney have? Because Disney's not one to take a step back, And so what did he have in mind for this movie, and what would it have been like, had things gone differently? It's
definitely, this movie was really disappointing to watch after Pinocchio and Snow White. It was like it just didn't, like, the plot was kind of like, it felt like this movie should have been longer, because, like, this movie's only a little over an hour long. The first 40 minutes are, like, setup almost. Like the stork, like the beginning shot of the storks bringing the babies, right? That's kind of a neat shot. And then, like, her, like, Jumbo kind of, like, waiting for Dumbo to come, and he doesn't come right away, right? And then you get the dumb stork who, like, gets lost or whatever and drops off Dumbo later. But, like, and that shot where he's, like, flying through the clouds is a really nicely animated shot, right? Like, where like, you can kind of see him through the clouds, but not really. That's a nice shot. But, like, the humans in this movie look like it. My daughter could draw these humans better and color them in. They look ridiculous. It feels like it was rushed, and, like, when I was watching, I was like, man, this feels really rushed, and I didn't even think about the war, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not really sitting around thinking about World War II all the time, guys. So,
sure.
How dare you?
Understandable.
But, like, I was watching, I was like, man, what happened? Like, what happened? Were they working on something, other big project, and this was just something that they had to rush out because they needed money? Like, what was this?
Yeah, that would be interesting context to find out, like, how more of the war kind of impacted other lines of business. But I totally agree. And actually, I'm looking at my list now. If we were to look at the characters, and I'm not saying that to have a good movie you need a wide cast of characters, but like my list is really short. I mean, you got Mr. Stork, who was only there in the beginning, and I do like that scene. It was probably the most memorable, happy scene for me from Dumbo. Just seeing all the cute little babies, and then the one who delivered Dumbo, how like Dumbo, because he's an elephant, like he kept sinking through the clouds, like that's adorable humor. Then you got Mama Dumbo or Jumbo Jr., the gossiping elephants, Timothy Q. Mouse, who technically wasn't really mentioned by name except for in the newspaper at the end, Ringmaster and the Crows, which we'll get to, but I'm saying like that's a very short list.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I'm not really quite sure where to go from here because
I'm just gonna say it. This movie is straight up bad. Like, for how iconic Dumbo is as a character, this movie is just bad. And we've watched a whole slew of Disney movies of the last couple months because my daughter's really into them. Right, like anything from Beauty and the Beast to Encanto to, which is an amazing movie, by the way. I love that movie. Everything in between. Right, like it's just. She loves it, and she loves Snow White. Like, she loves Snow White, which is crazy to me that, after watching something like Encanto, she still wants to go back and watch Snow White, right? Like, that just shows you the timelessness of Disney. But like, Dumbo it shocks me how iconic this movie is.
Yeah, Mark, I forgot if you mentioned either in the previous podcast or when we talked, did you watch Dumbo with your kids or?
Yeah, so I watched the first. I've started watching like the first half of these movies with my kids because typically things are pretty kosher in the first half, and then it takes quite the dip.
Yeah.
But with Dumbo, I had a good memory of what was happening in Snow White. Same thing with Pinocchio, but with Dumbo, I kind of forgot when it starts to take a turn, and so there's the scene where Dumbo kind of. He trips over his ears and causes the like big, or no, maybe it's before then. Anyway, where Dumbo's mom starts to freak out and they're like whipping her and like trying to tie her down.
Oh yeah.
And my daughter, I have 4.5-year-old twins and boy-girl twins, and my daughter was like, "Are they hurting his mother?" And so I was like, "And it's bedtime." So I watched the first 20 or so minutes with them, but then not the rest.
Yeah, I've been doing this journey, going on this journey with my son, and he's 6. And first of all, I just felt uncomfortable watching it just on my own for many reasons. And then with my son, I could tell he just was not amused, and it like nothing connected. Like maybe in his eyes, maybe the overarching concept or point of Dumbo went over his head. I just don't feel like a young child can really understand. They're just saying, okay, there's a circus, there's an elephant that has big ears, oh, he can fly, and the movie's over.
Yeah.
And he only flies in the last 5 minutes.
That's the thing.
That's what I was talking about in the beginning. Like with Pinocchio, I thought Pinocchio was all about him lying and having a big nose. Dumbo is in my head, about a flying elephant, and he flies in the last 5 minutes. Dumbo is not about a flying elephant at all. But in my head, that's what it's about. And I was so like genuinely shocked because I kept on looking, because the movie felt like it was 4 hours long, and I kept on looking at the clock and being like, he hasn't even flown yet. Like, what?
Yeah, he doesn't even fly till like the last third of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, the beginning part, the mom, oh, but can I just say, when the mom like freaking out over those like peckerhead kids, like, I will say, though, I was kind of like, go mom, because if some butthead kid just try to make fun of my kid, I will probably lose my shit. Sorry.
Yeah, I had no problem with the mom retaliating.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty intense, I mean, they're like, the whole background's red, and there's dramatic music, and they're like whipping the mom and throwing chains on her and stuff. Yeah, and so I was definitely
excessive.
You don't need to see that.
Oh, no, not at all. And obviously it's very, very sad. And, the mouse guy comes into the scene, did his, I don't know if you want to call it an accent or the way he speaks, did it annoy you? It just, that, I don't know how, like, it's almost kind of like a wise guy tone of voice. I don't know how else to explain it, but it just, like, kind of grated on me a little bit.
I mean, yeah.
I liked it a lot. I felt the same way about his voice that I feel about Jiminy Cricket's.
Okay.
There's just like a tonality to it, and like a, I don't know, that kind of old-fashionedness that I just really enjoyed listening to.
It definitely has its own personality, right? Like, it definitely feels that way. It also feels like they were trying to make another Jiminy Cricket, you know?
Yes.
And, I mean, clearly, I don't know how you guys feel, but as someone who grew up around Disney his whole life, like, Jiminy Cricket is definitely the more iconic character than Timothy Mouse, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I still like him as a character, and the fact that he kind of stood up for Dumbo and scared the elephants, which I thought was also a funny little scene. Like, I do feel like there are nuggets of funniness there. But when he comes up with a brilliant plan, and unfortunately, when I got the most uncomfortable, or of the many uncomfortable scenes, was after Dumbo is a part of the clown portion of the show, and then it totally went over my head as a kid. What Dumbo drinks ended up being their beer or champagne that got leaked into the water. I was just like, maybe he's sick, but I'm like, oh snap!
No, he's drunk.
Yeah.
Which I don't know about any times you guys have been drinking, but that's not the kind of stuff I associate with alcohol.
Yeah, that seems like
licking a stamp or something.
Yes, licking a stamp.
Sorry. Anyway, I know this isn't exactly the most child-friendly episode. Sorry, but in all seriousness, though, Pink Elephants is. I know it's famous. I know it's iconic, but I just did not understand it. And the colors, I'm sure they're trying to go for something different, but those eyes, those eye sockets of those elephants haunt me.
I wonder. I mean, I'm just speaking out of whatever here, but I wonder if somehow they got some feedback that, like, the smoking and drinking in Pinocchio was too much for kids, and this was their way of scaring them not to do drugs or whatever. Not that I know what life was like in the 40s, but you know, like that's where my head went when I saw this. I'm like, man, they made it look so fun. And like I know Pinocchio turned into a donkey or whatever, but like this really seemed like, oh, we're really gonna scare you now, you know. And it was scary. Like, these pink elephants are haunting. I remember having terrible nightmares between the pink elephants and then the Heffalumps and Woozles from Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
Always nightmares, and it was always these two things.
You know, I will say, because I remember being terrified of the pink elephants sequence, but watching it now as an adult, I started to see some of Disney's later brilliance in crafting these musical sequences that are like these surreal, like Broadway style productions. Like, I found a lot of similarities in Pink Elephants with Be Our Guest, or Just Can't Wait to Be King, or Under the Sea, or not in terms of the quality of the music. Obviously those songs are much better than Pink Elephants, but in terms of the production quality and the way that they built the musical number. And there were all these like vignettes of songs and different styles, and it just I was really surprised at how early on in the Disney canon there is this example of this really big show-stopping musical number that I think that they made some mistakes with. I think they went too far in the scary and whatever, but this early on, I really felt connections to Disney's like kind of golden age, or what I consider golden age of like the early 90s musicals. And so I came away from this loving that musical number as an adult. As a kid, I was horrified. But
you're so cultured, Mark.
I know. Mark's
Listen, we're talking about Disney animated films, so I don't know that culture is the right word.
Oh,
It
come on,
is.
look at that. For me, I'm like, it's scary. And it's like, well, it influences blah blah blah.
Well, I mean, but it is terrifying. And I think that's an interesting thought, Corey, that it's like, hey, listen, the feedback is now too many kids are smoking cigars and drinking because they think it looks fun. So you need to change that. And so, like, let's scare the crap out of them.
Yeah.
And that worked because I hated that scene as a kid.
Yeah, it was. I mean, between that and Pinocchio, I was like scared to death of all that crap. But
Yeah.
that's me.
Did any other characters in this film kind of stick out to you guys?
You mean besides the crows?
Yeah, which we'll get to.
One of my favorite scenes is actually right at the beginning with the train, right where it's like this really tiny train and he like goes to go and then it shows all the cars go backwards and then the caboose rams it forward, right? Like that scene's really cool. Like that opening part of that scene is really cool, but then like the train cars, and I know these aren't characters, but like the train is kind of a character, right? He's kind of like he has like a face and emotes and stuff, and like, but the rest of that scene, like the cars just look terribly animated, like they were rushed. They're not even like wobbling correctly. They're just like, oh well, this frame looks different, so the car's moving, and and just like all that kind of stuff, and the animals in the cars don't look correct. Like there's a scene where the lion is looking through the bars, right? And it just looks like it's not properly shaded anywhere the way that like Snow White was. Or because Mark, remember you brought up the fact that like instead of paint when they were doing the cells, they actually used makeup for Snow White's face. And like this was just like, oh well, we have yellow paint, lions are yellow, we're gonna paint the lion yellow. And it's just like, what is, like, I was dumbfounded by how bad this movie was. This reminds me of like the straight to DVD sequels that Disney started putting out in the 90s.
Oh, poor Dumbo.
Speaking of, they were gonna do a Dumbo 2. That was going to take place a couple years after Dumbo 1, but it was going to come out in like 2004 or 2005 or something. But when John Lasseter came in and took over when Disney and Pixar merged, he canceled hundreds of straight-to-DVD sequels.
Thank you.
Dumbo 2 was definitely one of them.
Yeah. Gosh, Bambi 2, Fox and the Hound. Like, there were so many bad direct to
I don't get it. All right.
But to your point, Corey, about how like terrible this movie seems like from an animation perspective, you have to think that, like, I mean, obviously because of the war, but I feel like there was a decision that was made where it was like, if we don't put out a film, Disney will no longer exist. Like, we can't sit this time period out.
Yeah.
We'll lose so much money. So we have to put something out, even though we know it's not the quality that it's going to be. And I think that's what, I mean, they also did like Saludos Amigos and Three Caballeros and stuff during that time. But,
and those were better animated movies.
Yes, for sure. But you have to think like they kind of made it like a devil's bargain where they were like, we got to put this crappy film out because we got to make some money back.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It was just disheartening because Disney is known for, like, especially at that time, just the quality of animation, right? And it just.
I got a question for you guys.
Sure.
You know how there are some characters in the Disney movies thus far, though there are side characters that are silent, like Dopey, or the sidekick to Honest John in Pinocchio. In this movie, it performs the same trend, but it's one of the main characters. It's Dumbo himself that did not have a voice. What do you feel would have changed about the movie? Would it be for the better, for the worse, the same if Dumbo was given a voice? What do you guys think?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think. I mean, honestly, I'm I'm not a fan of the silent protagonist. As a big fan of Zelda. But it felt like a little empty, to be honest, especially after like Snow White and Pinocchio are so personable and have such a great personality. And like, I get it. Sometimes like the silent character has the most personality because you can animate them. Like you look at Dopey, right? He's such an animated character, and his silence, like his facial expressions and the way he trips over himself, like that's an endearing personality trait, right? But like, I think that works a lot better with a side character than it does a main character, you know?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And I feel like the dynamic between Timothy and Dumbo lost something because Dumbo couldn't talk, right? Dumbo just kind of looked lost the whole movie, which I get it. He's a baby, technically, right? But like, it would have been better if they had a chemistry or like a back and forth, you know? It felt like it was losing something.
Yeah, to an extent, I agree, because I think in the beginning the silence kind of worked because Dumbo experienced the trauma of, in a sense, losing his mother. So I think sometimes just the tears and being unable to speak is actually really powerful. But then, like, you know, you get more towards the end where we're really trying to root for Dumbo and him learning to accept himself and be proud of who he is. I don't know, like Timothy Q. Mouse was really bearing a lot of weight, doing a lot of work with kind of carrying the narrative. But you know, like, I'm not trying to criticize literally everything about Dumbo. Like, I think Dumbo not having a voice is fine, but you know, it just made me think about that question because this is one of the first main characters that does not speak in Disney.
Yeah, but then you look at a movie like WALL-E where the main character hardly has a voice. He barely speaks in the entire. I mean, he says some things, but not much.
Yeah, but
WALL-E.
I mean, he says his name, but he can emote. He can emote
like
through that, right? Yeah,
right.
I mean, his eyebrows, but even through his voice, right? Like he can, like the inflection in his voice can tell you exactly what he's saying without having to say it, right? Like it's like Pokemon, right? You can always tell when a Pokemon's upset or happy, like WALL-E is just a robot Pokemon. Let's face it.
Right, but that's what I was trying to say is like they did such a good job with WALL-E with making him express himself in other ways. It seems like that's what was missing from Dumbo.
Definitely.
And so I feel like to answer your question, like I don't necessarily have a problem with the main character not speaking, so long as that character is given, you know, his power through something else and able to express himself another way.
Yeah.
Now, part of me wonders a little bit if this is supposed to be like, you know, if you really want to try to be like super like annoyingly intellectual about it or whatever, and if you think like if this is an allegory for a kid finding their voice and Dumbo flying is him finding his voice, then okay, maybe, but it feels like they didn't really dive into that. So I feel like there's a lot missing from the characterization of Dumbo in order to warrant him not having a voice. Yeah. So my answer to your question is, I think it would have been much better if he would have had a voice with what we were given, or if they gave him more character and more power to be able to express himself in other ways.
Yeah, I think, when you elaborate more on the WALL-E thing, like even if he just had like little elephant noises, but then utilize inflection when he makes those noises, I think it would have just taken it maybe it would have engaged us a bit more and developed a bit more empathy. I mean, like I said, we're all still rooting for Dumbo, but at the same time, there's, I just didn't feel it so strong.
The one thing the live action movie did do well was that they did exactly what you just said for Dumbo. He made elephant noises, and his elephant noise would get more high pitched if he was scared or curious, or lower if he was sad, or, you know, and so he was Dumbo himself in the live action Dumbo was portrayed really well in comparison to the animated one.
Right. Well, before we get into the real, I guess, meat and potatoes, I got a couple fun facts for y'all. I'm sure Mark knows them all because he's an
Mark
artistic
and knows
genius.
Everything.
Doesn't have a life.
Do you know? I didn't even realize the circus had a name. The circus name is WDP Circus. Did you know that stands for Walt Disney Productions? So it was a little Easter egg. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
And during production, the sidekick was originally going to be a red robin and not a mouse. I wonder what prompted that change. And then let's see. No, two more things. Dumbo was going to be on Time magazine cover, but the events at Pearl Harbor had taken precedent. So even though Dumbo is no longer on the cover, Dumbo was still mentioned as Mammal of the Year in an inside feature, which I thought was pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor probably a little bit more important to cover at that time than
yeah. Yeah, they know how to read a room. And then this one I found the most interesting, and I kind of do want to spend a minute talking about it. There was apparently a strike amongst the animators during production, and some say that Disney kind of poked fun at them in the scene with the clowns when they decided to, quote, hit the big boss for a raise. And I was like, oh, wow. Disney doesn't shy away from that stuff. But the reason why this made an impression on me is I feel that as much as I love Walt Disney himself and I love the Disney movies, I feel like a lot of his artists and animators are almost never happy. I always read these things where they're just so disgruntled and then they draw a penis on the cover of the mermaid. Like, I don't get it. Does anyone have insight on that?
I mean, Disney was a perfectionist, right? And like I mean, I think we kind of talked about this a little bit during Snow White, but like there were times when he would make them redraw whole scenes and it would take months because he didn't like the way it was animated, you know, and that was like the big thing where Walt was the visionary and then Roy, his brother, was the financial guy, right? And they worked so well together, and Roy always kind of like reined him in, you know, and just kind of like, oh yeah, we gotta just get it out there, you know, and so yeah, it's definitely Walt was a perfectionist, and I mean you can see it everywhere, and even to this day and stuff that comes out these days, right? Like that's just what Disney has always prided themselves on, and like, yeah, there's gonna be the cash cow stuff, like, you know, things that's going to make them money, and I know that it's a business and they want to make money, but at the time, especially, like, you know, if he didn't like something, he would make sure it was correct.
That's a good point. And if I was an artist, I wouldn't say I wouldn't be frustrated if I have to redraw things, but I don't know, I just feel like I hear them being upset all the time, and I don't know, they draw something in the movies or something because they're not happy about it. But I just found it interesting that some people kind of hypothesize that scene was kind of almost poking fun at the situation, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. It's just like, I don't really know how to explain it really, but like it just feels like visionaries and people who like have that vision or that artistic makeup, I guess you would say. Like, I mean, everybody thinks, you know, Steve Jobs, right? Nobody liked working for Steve Jobs. Bill Gates, nobody liked working for Bill Gates, right? Nobody likes the people in charge, right? It's just like they have a vision. They're going to do whatever it takes to hit that vision. And, you know, a topic for another show and another time is like, you know, the big thing in video game culture right now is like crunch and everything. Well, like, like no creative person works 9 to 5 and then shuts off their brain, you know? And I'm always of the idea of like, we can talk about that side of things on a different day, but like Walt Disney just never turned his brain off. You know, he was always working. He was always drawing. He was always working. He was always trying to come up with new ideas. Right. And he would do whatever he needed to get it. And that's just how he was. And yeah, people aren't going to like you for that. But at the end of the day, look at all these classics, right? An example, right? In the 80s when Don Bluth left Disney and almost tanked the company, by the way, because he took all the best animators. Nobody remembers Don Bluth's name unless you're like an animation nerd, right? Because he took some shortcuts. He didn't perfect his storytelling. Don't get me wrong. All Dogs Go to Heaven, classic movie. Secrets of NIMH, classic movie. Anastasia, classic movie. Nobody knows Don Bluth, right?
Right.
Everybody knows Walt Disney.
Right.
So,
good point.
and that's because he was a perfectionist.
And are you guys ready to talk about? I don't want to make this all about what Dumbo is, so I shouldn't say the meat and potatoes. But it's one of those things that in a modern society that I don't know will just be a part of Dumbo's identity for all of time, and I wouldn't call it just the crows, because I actually was even more uncomfortable when there was a scene where the laborers were pitching the tent in the rain, and I immediately noticed they all had dark skin, and I'm like, this is weird.
Not only did they all have dark skin, like they had dark skin and their like facial features were not defined. Like they were animated to look more animalistic and more like it was a choice. It was a very distinct choice.
Yeah, it was like, I don't even know, because that's how uncomfortable it made me, because I completely forgot about the tent building part, because who cares about that? And then I'm like, not even to give them a face like you said, and all the same color. I'm like, guys, that's like you said, that stuff's intentional. And
I mean, there's a scene before that too that kind of stuck out to me too, was like when they were, it might have been like right before they were building the tents or whatever, or maybe it was right after, I don't remember, but there were people riding in on camels, and they all looked like stereotypical kind of like Middle Eastern, people with like big kind of stereotypical mustaches, and like some of them had turbans and some of them had I don't know what it's called, like Abu wears in Aladdin, right? What is that called?
Oh, a fez?
Yeah. And they all had like the big pants and the swirly shoes, right? And I was like, man, that kind of like the first thing I noticed in this movie in a long line of things.
Yeah.
So to me, and I'm trying to say this carefully, but I agree with you, Stephanie. The scene of the pitching the tent in the rain, that scene to me was the I found the most offensive. The crows. What am I trying to say here? I take issue with what they named the crows, right?
Yep.
So like the lead crow's name was Jim Crow, and that they were crows, right? And so there was like that was a choice. But I don't think that the portrayal of the crows was, maybe I'm wrong for thinking this. Obviously, I'm white, so maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but I don't think the portrayal of the crows was particularly harmful. I think that the circumstances around the crows, the fact that they were crows, the fact that the lead one was named Jim Crow, I think that that's the harmful thing. What I was surprised with in that scene is that, because I remember the controversy with Dumbo being the crows, they weren't, their portrayal I didn't find to be a necessarily negative portrayal. They were well spoken. They were intelligent. They were good singers. They were like they hired musicians, people from bands to come in and sing for the rest of the show.
They were a positive influence on Dumbo.
Yes, all of those things. And so I think that the crows gets kind of pigeonholed as the like big bad thing for Dumbo, but I think that there are other elements that are kind of sneaky in Dumbo, like what we've just been talking about, that I think are more insidious than the crows scene overall.
And I understand you trying to approach the topic delicately. I mean, I'm Asian, but I'm still not of Black descent, so even I will still miss part of the perspective here. But I jotted down some notes, and so if we go over some of the facts here, you'll see that there are various point of views or points of contention here. So the first is, I mentioned the circus laborers. So yes, the lead crow was named Jim Crow. That's pretty, like I said, very intentional. The character name was changed in the 1950s to Dandy Crow, but I feel like the damage is already done. there are claims that the group of crows in the film were African American stereotypes. That could be kind of, again, depends on the person if they were to think that was taken to an extreme. But, like you said, they were voiced by African American actors and singers of the Hall Johnson Choir, which I think is who you were talking about. Yeah. I noticed in a 1973 book called The Disney Films. So there's a historian that argued that the crows they're undeniably black, but they are black characters, not black stereotypes. That's his words, not mine.
Right.
There is no, I can't pronounce that, type of that type of dialogue or Uncle Tomism in the scene. And if it's offenses to be taken in hearing blacks call each other brother, then the viewer is merely sensitive to accuracy. Take what you will about that statement. But in 2017, Whoopi Goldberg actually expressed the desire for the crow characters to be more merchandised by Disney because those crows, quote, sing the song in Dumbo that everybody remembers.
Well, I see the elephant fly. Is that?
Yeah. Which I actually think it's an amazing song. I love it.
It's a great song. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so I have a question about, that one comment. I think that was a really good quote that you just read, but about like they were, the criticism was that the crows were portrayed as stereotypically black. And my question is, and I don't mean this to be an insensitive question, but if you are making a movie, if you're making Aladdin, for example, and Aladdin takes place in the Middle East, and you have people wearing typically worn Middle Eastern clothes, or you have, a movie that takes place, Moana, where you've got Polynesian culture, right? Mm-hmm. Or you've got, Frozen, where you've got Scandinavian culture, and so they're eating things like fish, right? Or I'm stumbling for examples, but my point is if you're having these crows that are portrayed, they're positive characters, they're not played to be seen as dumb or to be seen as negative characters or evil characters or whatever, but if they're doing things that's seen as stereotypically black, I struggle to see the issue there. I struggle to see the issue. I see the issue in naming it Jim Crow. I see the issue in the workers who are all dark skinned and they don't really have any facial. I see those issues, but when you are portraying a character or a character type in a movie, you play into these stereotypes to indicate who this character is and what this character does. And so my question is, why is that necessarily seen as a negative thing, specifically in this sense, but maybe more generally overall? Mm-hmm. And when done in a positive light, I think that's the key. When done in a positive light, I have a hard time seeing why that is considered a negative thing.
I don't really know what to say about the crows, really. It didn't make me uncomfortable watching it the way that, the tent building scene did, right? Mm-hmm. But Disney, at least in like the late 90s up through now, has done a great job of Mulan, I think, is a great example of playing into the culture of the character, or even Raya or Encanto, or like you said earlier, Frozen, right? Like they all play into the culture in a great way. And not that like Dumbo did, because clearly there are issues with some of the things in that movie, right? But like you said, Mark, if you're going to have a quote unquote black character, you're going to want to write that as a black character,
Right.
It's hard to say, right? Because it's the 40s, and I'm clear. I'm not even white. I'm clear, right? It's like that famous line in Space Jam: "Larry's not white, Larry's clear." So like I don't want to say anything out of turn, but they definitely weren't as bothersome as I remember them being, or the way that the internet has made them seen, if that makes sense.
I'm sorry if I'm sounding repetitive. I've mentioned it quickly before, but this is the only way I can relate, is the Aristocats, which we will get to eventually. And the whole race problem there is the Asian cat, the Siamese cat. So I can actually speak to it as an Asian, so I feel more comfortable.
Sure.
I did look it up. It is voiced by what looks like a Caucasian name, Paul Winchell. So, and the cat is portrayed as like Asian, having like I believe he had an Asian accent. It's been a while since I've seen it. I'm pretty sure he did. Playing the piano with chopsticks. If anything were to be slightly more offensive, and I wasn't even offended, it would be that, because it's an Asian portrayed character, quote unquote, played by a Caucasian, or they at least. I'm not saying that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Crows. I'm just saying, like, they're trying to accurately reflect a type of character using, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And I think, and not to like speak for you or anything, but I think that those were two good examples to pull out. In Aristocats, he puts a symbol on his head, like a I don't know what that kind of hat is called, but the triangular hat, right? Mm-hmm. He puts a symbol on his head. He's playing with the chopsticks. The racial things that are used to inform that character are played for jokes and not played for honesty or to further the character more. They're just played for a gag, and that to me is offensive.
Yeah.
With the example of the Crows, they're not played, in my opinion, they're not played as a gag, and they're not played as just to poke fun at the character. They're played to inform the character. This is what the character does. This is how the character talks. This is how the character interacts with each other, calling each other brother and things like that. Like, that's just, those are character choices, and not, let's take something that Black people, right or wrong, are known for and use it to make people laugh. It's, let's take something that Black people are known for and use it to inform who this character is. And to me, that's the difference between a racist interpretation of a character and character building traits to inform who the character is.
Exactly. In another way, like, I feel like the cat in Aristocats is more of a caricature of an Asian character, whereas the Crows are the Crows. They are genuinely the Crows.
Right.
But I mean, the bottom line, at least for me, is at least we're having an open dialogue about it. I have a hard time with people who only see it a particular way, one way or the other, right? Because we all three of us acknowledge the time it was made. There's definitely some things we learned from it. And to be honest, I am glad that Disney made the decision not to pull these movies. If they wanted to put the little disclaimer in the beginning, like, so it can be educational, I think that's more important than pulling it. So I think ultimately Disney made the right decision, keeping Dumbo and other movies on.
I mean, they did take them out of the kids section too, though. I get it, right? Like, I like that. I'm just saying, like, I'm glad we had a discussion about this too, because, like, this is just across all of our shows, right? Like, I want to make sure that we are able to have the open conversation, right? I don't want to be known as this place where, we are extremely against people who think differently than us or don't want to have the conversation. They're so one-tracked, like you said, Stephanie. And, like, I think, Mark, you did a great job of navigating that path and really having the good dialogue and the good conversation.
So
I feel like it's so difficult these days because I don't feel like there's space to question things out loud. And I think that that's something, there are so many great things that we're doing right now and so many great ways that we're evolving and becoming better, more conscientious people. But I think the one thing that we've really lost is grace, and the grace to give people space to process things out loud. So I don't, obviously I said the things that I said, so I don't think that what I said was wrong, but let's say what I said was wrong, right? I think that it's okay for me in a space like this to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about these things. Now tell me how I'm wrong. Tell me what I'm thinking is, or how it's wrong. But we've gotten in such a space where people are so terrified to even say why are people upset about the crows in Dumbo, for example. That I think we've lost some of that, but I think that just like people think that Dumbo is a movie about an elephant that can fly when it takes place in the last 5 minutes, I think that people throughout the years have said, oh, there's a racist interpretation as the crows, and that has become the stamp that is on Dumbo. But when you really watch it and engage with it, maybe that's not what happened. Maybe there are other areas where there are some worse portrayals than the crows, but I think that it's just been branded as this thing, and so then that's it.
Yeah, many people will just automatically kind of hop on that train and just be like, yep, the thing with the crows, that's racist. Like, well, if you don't really look and examine the movie, like you said, Mark, there's stuff that's even worse. And then also you can dissect and find out like what part of the crows makes it uncomfortable. What part of the do people really know the whole like Jim Crow thing? You know what I'm saying? So it's important to talk about, not just automatically take the stance if everyone thinks this one thing is offensive and that's it. Fine. No, you need to understand why. It's part of our learning process as human beings, learning about the past and being better.
I mean,
there it is.
Like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really know what the Jim Crow thing is, to be honest. Like, I never really like learned about it, or was in a situation where I needed to know what it was, you know? Like,
so Jim Crow laws are a set of laws that were, I don't even know what time frame they were in, but they're a set of laws that purposely are made to put black people down.
Racial segregation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a segregation.
Right. But even terrible laws that were made, terrible, right? Like pitting black, like white people against black, like that black people were non-human, right? Like terrible laws. But I think also you have to consider when this movie was made, they were laws that were like like happening. And so naming something like Jim Crow foolish, not wise, like all of those things, but it is a product of its time. And so I do think also a lot of times now we view things from a 2022 perspective, but you've got to put yourself in the time where things were made.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thanks for explaining that. You know, like sometimes, like that's another thing is like sometimes we live in an era where like you can't ask questions because it makes you look like a bad person almost in certain places, you know, and sometimes I just don't ask questions, which is another terrible thing to do to not educate yourself on these things.
Exactly. It's important. All right. I know it's a heavy topic, but I'm really glad we talked about it. And, it was a good conversation. It was a short movie. I think our listeners know that it definitely wasn't our favorite movie, but I still think, it's part of Disney's legacy. Parts of Disney would not be Disney without it. So as we wrap up, I'd like to address our definitive ranking. Currently, Pinocchio is at number 1. Snow White is at number 2. Where do we see Dumbo fitting? I think everyone can guess where, but it's going to be number 3 for me.
Yeah, it's definitely number 3 for me as well. It's not good. Like aside from like the race things, this is just not. It's just not a good movie. It's terribly animated. The story is not great. It's just
yeah.
Right.
Number 3 for me as well.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for your time. It was another great episode. Thank you for joining us. Let's start where we could find everybody. Mark, please tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me obviously on Boss Rush, writing things about movies and all things entertainment, and maybe the occasional video game thing if I have time to play a video game. And then you can also find me here on Standard Definition when we do the Disney rewatch, and we're also doing a MCU rewatch, and then on Twitter at Except in Pererra.
Awesome, excellent. Corey, where can fans find you?
You can find me at I am Corey HD on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me hosting the Boss Rush podcast every Wednesday night live on twitch.tv/Boss Rush Network. You can find me hosting our Xbox podcast, Arsenal X, and doing various other things here on the Boss Rush Network.
All the things.
Some of the things.
All the things. And again, this is Stephanie. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Klimov, KLIMOV_author. I also co-host Boss Rush podcast Wednesday night. I make appearances as well on After Dark. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. We'll be back. I think Bambi is next. I already closed out on my schedule here, but we'll see y'all soon. Stay safe. Be happy, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.